Circling each other, Kerakoos and DrBossKey test each other's combat skills.
So there's this shot in particular. I remember that I had to go back and forth with Eddie a few times, where Eddie was just, he's like, I can't believe you want, like, I didn't think you wanted it this simple, because I did a very basic layout. And this is a version of DrBossKey. Again, like, this was essentially, I wound up, we had a version of him kind of from the back. He's got these weird like eye butt pants, which are pretty interesting. And not that that's not our final design, but we had this piece of, we have a lot of in between art, right? So, and I basically just kind of very quickly just deleted some of these things to give it kind of like this the sketch style with some things filled in, and then on this backdrop of paper, which wasn't there. And then, obviously, Kerakoos is final in this case. And for me, I really just wanted to have that conveyance of them, essentially circling each other, right? So it was kind of that mano-a-mano thing, right? Like, how do you kind of convey this with simple objects? And I think, in hindsight, one of the things I would have done is I would have started DrBossKey over here, and then I'd have them do the rotation. And then what I would do is I'd put him on a U curve, and I'd put Kerakoos also on a U curve right here, right? On an arc, I guess. Not really a U, I'd probably more like an arc. And then I would scale Kerakoos to make him feel like he's further away, and then kind of at full scale at the top, and then further away on the side. And then counter scale DrBossKey the same way. So we kind of get that sense, a little bit more of a circle. But it was, Eddie, I remember it was distinctly Eddie going, I was like, Eddie, I just want this. I just want this shot like this. Because we had a couple things in there, and they were kind of messy, not quite working. And I was really just looking for that, like, that mano-a-mano, circling each other, and trying to like kind of go through that. And I was very okay with us having basically a simplified style here. There's nothing very exciting about the background. It's all paper, right? Like, this feels like some weird illustration thing. But for some reason in my mind, I really just like the way it kind of came together, and that it was simple. And that it did convey, I think, what was happening between Kerakoos and DBK. Anything else you guys want to add before we move on?
I would like to add that in this scene, we do only have the concept pretty much of DrBossKey's back pose, which this is not our final design by any means, but it almost gives you the feeling that we don't know who this adversary of Kerakoos's is at this time. It's just, he's an unknown hero facing off against this super evil that has started to take over this world very early in the streaming, very early in the content creation. And I think that having this within the video kind of shows how much as just a channel we have grown, and how much DrBossKey as a hero has grown within our animations.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Thank you for that, Zay.
Sparks fly as metal sword legs and tentacles stab at DrBossKey.
And so, as we're talking about them having their combat, right? So we go away from the paper style for that particular shot, and then, how do you convey something without, without spending a billion years trying to do it, right? Like, we could easily try to take Kerakoos, right? And try to have his sword legs and his tentacles. Like, we could have easily tried to like make that a shot with a Kerakoos full body to full frame, DrBossKey in the shot. And the reality is I think, and this is one of the things, I don't even think I directed this. I think that was one of Eddie's inspirations, which was take the art assets, use them and accentuate the words, which we're talking about them stabbing and doing the attacks. And while they don't have any context, it sort of builds this mind's eye and a little bit of graphic visualization plus some effects, as little sparks and whatnot. And I really like the way it turned out there. What are you thinking, Eddie?
Me too. I think my favorite thing about that is how much it breaks up everything else that's happening in between the confrontation between Kerakoos and DrBossKey. It's a nice sort of look into the sort of anatomy of him, and it's a good close up to even like his big steel legs that you wouldn't otherwise get a close up. I love the embers. I love the light that they emit and everything. I really like that segment. I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And that's the thing. He's got these like, they're very Soul Edge, Soul Blade, Soul Calibur, styling, like legs. And when a Kerakoos or a Blood Crab's running at you, it's just like this metal cacophony, right? It's crazy scary. Kerakoos kind of scares me a little bit, I have to say.
Kerakoos scares you, and that's because Kerakoos was actually from a nightmare that you had described on stream, and I didn't realize that it was Kerakoos that you were talking about until probably 4 to 5 months after he had already been created.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure he was there, when you create something, at least for me, you get close to something, it certainly manifests itself in different ways. So, there were some definitely parallels there. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Zay.
It's just dawned on me that Kerakoos may be like your interpretation of your psychological Jungian darkness.
Well, let me just be a content creator. Yes.
Yes.
The DrBossKey saga really is about the journey of the hero, dealing with all form and manifestation of evil and oppressive imbalances in the world. So it's really an outpouring of my psychological understanding and self-journey to become more. And one of the parables of the DrBossKey world that people don't really understand is that basically DrBossKey doesn't murder any of his enemies. He does something far worse. He transforms them into furniture and weapons
and clothes and accessories.
I'm gonna make a Kerakoos coffee table. How do you like this with my feet on you?
Yes, sure.
Oh man. So one of the things I had Eddie create for me before we even did this is I said, Eddie, I'm thinking about this this animation. If you guys watch the stream, you've seen it a million times, right? And I'm like, look, we're not animators. We have a 2D piece of art, and I'm okay if we just do something silly, right? Like, it's not gonna be the best, but it's like I hit this this moment where as we create these characters, they're now becoming manifestations on the show, and I've got a whole row of buttons to just push to enjoy seeing these characters come to life and be utilized and be there. Eventually we might hook a few other things up to like to commands and whatnot, but it also gives me these kind of live remixes. So you'll notice again here, right, that Eddie actually did this animation first, and then we sort of backfilled it into...
Pulls back, tentacles flaring high overhead, and then leaps forward, stabbing the ground.
We basically wound up utilizing that in the animated short. And again, like,
leaps forward.
It's like the leap. And then it was right around this time where I started having this conversation with Eddie, where I was like, hey, Eddie, we'd started thinking about effects, but I was like, we should think big effects, right? And we've seen these manifestations. I did this Kerakoos blade. So it's the Kerakoos Bastard Sword. That's one of Kerakoos' legs, basically, right? And he gets transformed into that. We're starting to think more and more about these big screen takeovers, these big screen effects, things that really give you punch, that are kind of exciting to look at. They're very anime-esque, I think, in a lot of their ways. And one of the first places we did that
the ground,
is this, right?
His rupturing hell spirits.
And here we had this wonderful piece of key art where, and I'm still we have this now where we have an actual animation
stabbing the ground,
where Kerakoos is animated to this kind of key pose, and we're gonna eventually do an animated on-screen animation for him on the show as well as soon as we get the effects together. But so this is a good example where we had these 5 or 6 kind of key illustration spots. And it's like, hey, we can actually tell a little bit of story here.
Rupturing hell spirits. Kerakoos doesn't hold back, rupturing the ground, sending a fissure of hell towards DrBossKey.
So we got into these battle bits, right? And it took us a while to get there.
Stabbing the ground.
I really liked these, like, hey, and I had to develop this. I remember distinctly having a QA session on the video, and I was like, all right, Eddie. I didn't realize I knew this, right? I was like, oh, hey. like we shouldn't have characters coming in from, from the opposite sides. We had a number of shots where Kerakoos was coming in from the left when he was previously on the right, and like we were establishing in my mind, like, DrBossKey's kind of always on the left, Kerakoos is always on the right, even if we kind of align them differently. I mean, technically with the rotation shot, I did put Kerakoos on the left where he ends there, but mostly trying to get used to keeping that mental framework of the battle there.
So I remember in the feedback process, this is actually when I started kind of dipping my toes into the whole animation and really starting to look it over and appreciate it for what it was. The background color was originally blue, and I was like, why don't we shift that to purple so that way it matches the actual keyframe art that we have? And Eddie was like, oh yeah, wow, I didn't even think about that. So
it looks so much better. It looks so much more congruent and with the character, with the attacks and everything. That didn't even cross my mind, and when you said it, it made complete sense.
Right. And it just really kind of ties into the fact that the more eyes that you can get on a project, the more creative it's going to end up being in the end, because you're not just relying on one person's creativity. You then have a group of people who are working together towards the same goal to accomplish great creative things.
Yeah, and what I've noticed, I think, in this whole process was that I'm usually creatively quite possessive of anything that I make, and that turns into sort of like perfectionism, which is the worst thing in the world for productivity. So I think working with the team, I guess I can admit it now, I was never really good at it, like throughout college and stuff. But I definitely feel like I broke that barrier. Thanks to you. Thanks to DrBossKey, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, it's been an experience for, just working with you and giving you my input on scene to scene and working with DrBossKey to put the art together. So it's been quite a journey with the team.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I think stepping into the second shot here too. So yeah, like big, like this is very like, this is like, this is like the super, this is like doing a super in a fighting game, right? Like I'm not apologetic for it. I love fighting games. And I really wanted to kind of convey these aspects of that. And simply, I mean, one of the things I did is I bought 500 different effects packs, and then I went through those and I just tagged all the ones that I wanted Eddie to explore with. And once you start looking at these things, he gets excited by some of these things. I get excited about some of these things, and then it becomes about how do we execute these things. The rupturing hell spirits, we never quite got to where I wanted with them in particular, because they were kind of fireball-y, and with the way I saw them in my mind, it was tough to kind of get, but I do like kind of what we got to. So we did a number of revs on them, but I overall I'm happy. It gives that big, like, it's exciting, right? Like the shot happens, it's clear, like Kerakoos is jumping in, he leaps in, and he's doing his crazy like power attack. These rupturing hell spirits are coming towards DBK. And then, I think some of the real magic that happened here too, right? As we're talking through the, the combat shots, right? So, because we didn't have art, right? Basically, Eddie wound up, and I think it helps having the dialogue. You can see here, right? Like we're rotating the camera. He's looking down. Oh my God, rupturing hell spirits, right? And then like he comes back, he's like, oh shit, there's another one, right? And you see this whole thing. Oh, here come the small, fireball-y spirit things as well, all coming towards DBK. Like this is it. Kerakoos is just laying it all out, right? And we go with this very first-person camera, and I definitely love like here it comes in front of like DBK's face, right? Like we definitely kind of put that first-person perspective there, right? And then it's like, that was everything that Kerakoos had to do. That was him unleashing everything, right? And like the whole thing tells like a fantastic effects story. And there was enough noise. We got some random like fire stuff here, and we have some like danger kind of looks, like, and it all kind of came together. But it's I don't think a lot of people notice it. They just accept it. And that's kind of the joy, I think, of when you want to tell a story from a certain perspective. We go from this like here comes the big power attack, and then like DK is in the middle of this power attack, right? Like
sending a fissure of hell towards
and it's just all coming together, which was really, really cool. And I liked it, and it took us a little bit to get there, but and I think we adjusted a number of the effect shots a bit. Some of the first person stuff worked really, really well. I think we took off a little bit of the camera rocking on a few of the shots, but I really liked, I thought it conveyed the kinetic excitement of here's characters doing battle, and by the way, the characters, they're not really like interacting, right? Like, so we took a first person perspective. I think now that we have DBK we'll have him from a back shot, like we can probably, if we want to, we can put him in, and have some of the action kind of over his shoulder and do something like that. But I think I wouldn't be afraid to go back to a first person camera perspective to kind of convey that like one-on-one, again, the characters interacting, which was really, really cool. It turned out better than I expected it to.
Yeah, me too. And like you say, I love that it was the spawn of not having the assets at that time. That actually was quite an early scene, right? And it was due to not having a lack of choice, really. And I love that it stayed in it. It doesn't feel jarring, which I thought it might once we started out DBK in, but it doesn't at all. I think it feels really natural, really fluid. And I actually that sort of barrage, that attack there, is one of my favorite parts in the video. So
yeah, I think it definitely took us there. So which was great. I mean, it was really, really fun to I think work through the shots. And it got closer to what I was imagining for sure. Which is always the trick, right? Like you go from words to trying to write action in a way that another person can follow it, and then you have the interpretation to the visual medium. So I thought we really I enjoyed that a lot. So and then the next shot, right? So we've got this battle. Kerakoos is just he's unleashed everything, right? It's just a mother clucker, right? And then we go with that kind of first person perspective again.
DrBossKey dodges to the side, lunging forwards between Kerakoos' sword legs to land a mighty slash into the demon's fleshy weak spot.
I like that we conveyed this sense of, we use the trick of counterscaling the character to seem like they're getting bigger to the, closer to the camera. DrBossKey, we've got all the speed lines running. We've got like these interesting speed bits on the side. We've got the speed lines in the back. And we've got the sword, you're still kind of first person, so with the sword there. And then we do this thing. It took me forever, I think, to get Eddie like, hey, let's get a swipe that feels like a swipe. Swipes are usually very, very quick anyways. And to get that sort of exchange between the characters, we get the fountain of blood spray, right? I really, again, that was kind of a continuation of kind of how we're building all the shots up. I think we've developed an interesting language for the characters fighting, and I can see us using this again similarly for our next animated shorts.
Yeah, I mean, I looking at it now, it's not something that really occurred to me, but that sort of these speed lines, I really love the color. It's almost like that golden hero sort of, and then it's that rush towards the final blow. So yeah, I really like it.
Side lunging forwards between Kerakoos' sword legs.
Now the scene in general is very impactful for me. I mean, I remember sitting here and watching iterations of this animation go by from Eddie with feedback from DrBossKey, and each time we got a new version, it was like, holy cow, this is becoming real. It went from just words on the screen, Kerakoos is here, DrBossKey is here, to the images look like you are behind the camera with DrBossKey, with the soul key in your hand, charging at Kerakoos. And I understand, that probably it won't be the same in future animations, but if we could tie it in somehow, it really makes you feel like you are part of the animation. And this scene in particular is my favorite, especially when he goes under with the VFX, the visual effect there. I love it. I feel like I can clearly see myself as DrBossKey with just Kerakoos blood splattered across my whole body and my whole soul key. I know I'm so gory and gross, and it just makes you feel like you're part of it.
Very cool. I didn't realize that was one of your favorite shots. That's very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Zay. I appreciate that.
Into the demon's fleshy weak spot, Kerakoos bellows out in rage, collapses to the ground.
So it's a small thing, but I really do like, it was something communication wise, right? Like you have this big creature, big boss monster, right? DrBossKey and him are facing off. I like that we have this swipe, the final blow, right? And then the final blow, the final blow, it's accentuated that it's sort of like a mortal blow. We've got almost that typical like blood spray across the lens, right? And then I really do enjoy that. So like while I'm narrating the thing, basically we go down to a minimalistic shot to accentuate the death blow. We have these billowy like cloud things, like that might be a blood spray, a blood cloud. I don't know what it is. It's just emotion really in this case. But I like that we have this little bit of pause before this thing happens.
Bellows out in rage.
And then one of my favorite things that happens is that, Kerakoos bellows out in rage, and then he goes, right? Like, and then he hits the ground, and then we have this big, like, maybe a little bit too crazy, but we got these billowing, like, clouds for him hitting the ground, right? Well, whatever. It accentuates the fact that it's big, right? And I really like the way those things came together. So
I agree, and I think that the smoke is justified, because if you've got two tanks dropping down onto the ground, leaving a crater.
Mm-hmm. It definitely sells it. So like I said, like we're trying not to take ourselves too seriously, and that's always the case, right? So we go bigger with a lot of the effects. Big effects are a big thing that I personally enjoy. We can definitely see it all over this. So I think it fits in that context.
The hues of his soul essence and body begin breaking down and seeping towards DrBossKey's soul key blade. A deep sound of bitter relief escapes Kerakoos as his essence is drawn into the weapon. He says,
so this shot here
towards DrBossKey's soul key blade.
So we iterated on the shot quite a bit. And it took us a while to really get to it. And I think the big part, right, is we have DBK, and then Kerakoos is of course defeated. And the thing is the soul key blade, just like the story says, is all about it's the device that transforms his enemies into living weapons, right? The soul key blade actually clones itself and becomes another living weapon. DrBossKey stores them all in his infinite pocket. He then, just like you would in a video game, like kind of Mega Man, right? Like every time you defeat a boss, you get their weapon, right? So, and that comes with power. So it's very video game tropey, right, in that respect. And it's no surprise. Like I said, part of it is building. I'm building this as I would build sort of like a video game as well. So I like the concepts and ideas for that. But with the effect shot, I really like because one of the things that we get, one of our key illustrations, is we get a defeated pose for our main character, and then we get an absorption pose, right? So and they're just two key illustrations,
breaking down and seeping towards DrBossKey's
and so
soul
what we
key
did
blade. A deep sound
is
of bitter relief escapes Kerakoos.
We basically use both the key shots. We do a crossfade between them, but the thing that I really wanted to kind of convey was that the life essence of the character itself is actually being pulled into the blade, the matter. The physical manifestation of the monster is actually being absorbed into the soul key blade too. And I think that Eddie really hit the shot. It took us a long time to get to the effect, but I really like when we basically have this like bloom. That's the main character and the particles
seeping towards
like that.
That's
just the key art that we used. And when Eddie finally got to the shot, like when we after we kind of went through it a few times, it's easily one of my favorite parts about the whole animatic itself,
seeping towards DrBossKey's
because it gives it enough noise to illustrate kind of what's happening. It's kind of like you can kind of, I want people looking more over here and less over here on the shoulder and bits.
DrBossKey looks at his,
and that was really good. That was, this is a key theme that is about DrBossKey and the world and his interface with with the monsters and things that have grown beyond balance in these worlds. And I think that this is really this is kind of the big payoff of it happens between him and all his different characters, all his different enemies for the most part. And I thought we really did a great job capturing it. So easily one of my favorite bits. Eddie, do you want to talk a little bit about our journey to kind of get to this shot, what that meant for you?
I really did feel you conveyed exactly how you wanted it to feel, or how to look rather. and I felt you, and I wanted, I wanted equally to capture that like that plume, that absorption, that slow sort of victorious kind of moment, and I think that it was really just finding the right effect, which I think we did, and I think we're going to reuse it.
Mhm.
You can see the like the I think it was the initial sort of waves of energy there, that are still in the shot, was actually more or less, and it looks so underwhelming when you imagine it now. But those waves of those, what would you call them, energy
Mhm.
lines that are moving towards.
Yeah, they're like I don't know, I think of those like they're stronger aspects of the spirit. They're like
Yeah,
soul lines, soul key
yeah,
blades.
right. But that's all that we kind of had before we found that effect, and it didn't pack a punch. It wasn't visceral enough. So
Mhm.
when we found that, and God, yeah, I love it too. Like I absolutely love that moment when it breaks apart and just starts to absorb towards them. I think it's awesome.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
my favorite part of it is this right here.
yeah,
Boom. Like that is so good. It's just so good. Like you get that high level of just noise and like the essence, right? And I mean the key art, and that's the other part of this, right? Is like basically that second frame. I mean, these are all the strokes of from like the art itself, and then being able to do this kind of particle layer and breaking up of that.
mm,
Oh, it's so good. I mean, this easily probably this is my favorite shot. I mean, I really like the Soul Keyblade. Like I see the problem with the shoulder. I see the problem with like the hand and the hand that holds down here. But like happy accidents. I think we really again like the audio comes together, the soundtrack. Like the character is acquiescing. In terms of like my soul is yours. Like the transformation. This is when I started imagining what the hero does in the world, how he walks through the world. I think this really captures that transference, and I think you crushed it. It was really great, and it took us a while here, but this is one of those cases. We probably iterated on this shot alone, probably half a dozen times, maybe 10 times, something like that, to really get to this point. But I think it was worth it. I mean, it was a huge payoff shot. So
yeah. At one point, it looked entirely different. There was like it was really wide, and there was like particle effects like
oh yeah,
going through them. Yeah, yeah. So no, I love the finish.
yeah, totally. Is there anything else you want to add? Any other questions before we move on?
Yeah, so this is obviously my second favorite scene if the Sulky one is my first, but it's a very overwhelming scene. You've kind of got the god rays coming down from above. Like this is Karakoos's time. He is done and he knows it. The music is absolutely astonishing. It really ties everything together, kind of like just that singing, that lady singing. It could be Allura up in the heavens going, yes, Dr. Bosky, you're fulfilling everything.
The hues of his soul essence and body begin breaking down and seeping towards DrBossKey's soul key blade. A deep sound of bitter relief escapes Kerakoos as his essence is drawn.
And the movements, I see the shoulder and I see the hand movements, and it's not quite as smooth as we want it, but it's a good stepping stone. And I just want to point out, this scene right here is another milestone for the team and the channel. This is our first usable piece of DrBossKey art. We really pushed the bar and changed our process with our artists to gear them towards animation at this point, because before that we were pretty much just working with still images,
Mhm.
as you can see with Kerakoos. And putting this animatic together has really driven the direction of our future assets and the content that the channel has.
Well said, Zay. No, absolutely. I think that there were some really good spots. And as part of it is by doing you learn, and by learning things change, and it's part of the creative process. And where you can never sit down and imagine everything that's going to happen. It's just not possible. And so you have to consign yourself to realizing sometimes we're gonna have to make changes that are hard. Changing our art pipeline and the way we develop a new language. I mean, every project you develop, like there's no one size fits all. People learn to work together, and they learn to speak a shorthand about like what they're, you know, what they're trying to achieve. And I think that, you know, the shot is a good example of that. And I think when you map things to, you know, like when we have the lilting, you know, the voice in the background with, you know, and the music carries this quite a bit. One of the things that Eddie's really good at, he has a good sense for drawing out emotion and his timing, especially with his musical choices and such. This isn't the first time he's done that, and it brings so much more to the scene. And the fact that you backfill it into like Allura and this could be the goddess and these other things is great. Like I didn't even think about those aspects of it, but the fact that there's room for the art to lend itself to that interpretation. You know, it's like, as I paraphrase, but it's the, you know, the wise artist always sits back and listens to what people have to say, and is always marvels at what people ascribe to the art that they're experiencing. And then when they share those feelings, you know, the artist just nods their head, you know, sagely nod your head. Like you may not have planned for it, because once you make art, it's not yours anymore. It's the beholder, you know, it's the person that's willing to interact with the art. It's really theirs. And art experiences are unique in that respect. We try our best to put parts of ourselves into what we want to create, and at the end of the day, it's really what people take away from it that is most astounding. And it never is a one-to-one in that respect. You can try so hard to convey a thing, and people, just because of factors you didn't necessarily think about, or you know, are happy accidents, can ascribe so much more to the work than you ever expected. Cool. Anything else before we move on?
Essence and body begin breaking
That's it.
down and seeping towards DrBossKey's soul key blade. A deep sound of bitter